Hello everyone! Today I'll be giving some advice for making thumbnails or storyboards for your webtoon. On screen right now, I'm working on the revamp of my current webtoon called Light in the Ashes, which will be coming out this May, so make sure to check it out when it does come out. So, you have your script fleshed out for the episodes and now you're ready to jump into drawing? Actually no. Before you start making those vertical files in your drawing software, you need to make a rough storyboard or thumbnail for your episode. I like to do these the old-fashioned way, on paper, actually in a dedicated spiral journal, which has stickers of Ito Shiren from Blue Lock and Murasaki Bara from Kuroko no Basket. If you're curious about that, I know I would be, but if you were. But for me, doing thumbnails by hand is super helpful because of the associations I kind of have with traditional and digital art. To me, digital art is like a finished product. So when I'm at my desk with my drawing tablet in front of me, it's webtoon time or illustration time or time to finalize character designs, something I need to finish, with color and everything. However, traditional art for me is a planning stage, so it's easier to do planning things like thumbnailing or maybe early character design work. So doing these thumbnails traditionally or digitally, whichever one you prefer, you can do either one. I just prefer traditional. But now, again, to how to actually make thumbnails. So the goal of thumbnailing is to lay out your paneling ahead of time so you can make sure your comic flows well before you dedicate hours to penciling and inking and coloring your comic. So, first off, what is comic flow? Comic flow is basically the ease with which readers can actually read your comic. This includes everything from reading dialogue and speech bubbles to understanding the actions happening in each panel. A reader should be able to read your episode with extreme ease, and so that means not missing any important action or speech bubble, and for them to know the order to read the speech bubbles without having to kind of guess. For speech bubbles, if you're writing webtoon English, if you can understand this video, maybe you will, the bubbles should be from left to right. I know in manga it's right to left, but Japanese is traditionally read right to left. English is not. So if you're writing in English, it's easier for readers to do it from left to right. Some other tips, of course, would be to not include too much text in each bubble, and not include too many bubbles in one panel. That's just overwhelming for readers to read. So you can plan where your speech bubbles go in this thumbnailing process, so you can make them easy to read and not cover up too much art when you get to the drawing. In traditional comics, think like, actual comic books, the main juggling game is trying to include speech bubbles in a way that doesn't cover too much art, or cover any important art, but still has good flow. However, for webtoons, it's a bit different because you don't really have the issue of covering up art if you don't want to. Because webtoons, you have endless scrolling, so speech bubbles can go in gutters without affecting comic flow. And gutters, by the way, are the white space, or any kind of blank space. It doesn't have to be white, it can be black or whatever, but any space between panels. Those are the gutters. And generally for traditional comics, you don't want anything in those gutters, right? But for a webtoon, because you have endless scroll, you have a lot of space between, those gutters, you can have, speech bubbles in there, it's no problem. As infinite as webtoon upload size are for canvas creators, so not really infinite, but mostly infinite scroll. But so thumbnailing is the best time to lay out where your speech bubbles will go because it's low fidelity and it's easy to change or move things around if the flow is confusing or you're covering something you don't want to. Very easy to change, move it around without having to spend hours and regretting, oh, why I draw this, why I do that. Your thumbnail should be simple, very quick kind of sketches. They're meant to show the layout, not meant to be detailed or anything. So another key part of comic flow is the actions in each panel. You want to make sure that each action is easy to understand and that readers aren't confused on what's going on. A good way to check for this is during the thumbnailing stage because you can identify the silhouette of your characters in the background and check for clarity. Another element to consider as well for the action in each panel is to consider the type of shot and angle you'll be showing the action from. For example, usually in the beginning of your episode and also the start of each scene, where the background changes, so yeah. You want to establish the background and where the characters are with an establishing shot. So an establishing shot is a zoomed out shot that showcases the background so that the readers know where the scene is taking place. This type of shot is very important, but depending on your genre, This could be extremely critical. For example, if you're making something, that's sci-fi or fantasy comic, or any kind of speculative genre where it doesn't take place in a world that we know, in a world that's completely different from our own, and the readers reading it don't have an existing schema of what the world is like, then you really need to hone in and focus on detailing those establishing shots more than, say someone working on a contemporary comic, for example, that's set in modern day, where most readers kind of know what things look like. But of course, it's still important to actually establish your background and personalize it for your story, even for contemporary stuff, because the world is a big place, right? Is your place supposed to look like a big city like New York City? It's supposed to look like a small town, a farm, right? So you still have to detail your background so readers kind of know what kind of vibe you're supposed to get. I just wanted to mention that for fantasy and sci-fi specifically, it is much more vital for the readers to be immersed in the world. So another kind of shot we want to include are mid-shots, which are good for showing action. So mid-shots usually show majority of the character, usually their entire torso or maybe even up to their knees or so, and also show a decent amount of the background. Another type of shot, although this isn't the official name for it probably, I'm just going to call it this, it's like a talking head shot. So think like you're reading webtoon, you see like a kind of a portrait of a character, like their face, maybe their body, their shoulders and everything, and they're talking. So these are really good at when characters are having a conversation, back and forth, and they're nice because they focus on the character's expression and are not that hard to draw. Like if you like drawing characters, it's probably the most fun shot you'll be drawing. However, a big warning with these kinds of shots is that if they're used too much, readers kind of get bored and kind of hate it, right? And they're kind of known for people overusing them, so watch out for that especially. And this is even worse if it's always a straight on angle and it's repeated for several panels. So a good way, maybe you have a long scene of dialogue and you have to use talking heads. Well, you don't have to, you should still change it up, but say you want to do talking heads, but you want to add a little spice, a little variance to it. A good way to mix up these shots is to switch up the angle, so maybe do a higher angle or a lower angle that you're showing the character from, or zooming out or zooming in. So you can zoom out to show more of the character's body and the action they're doing, or zooming in to either a part of their body or an object they're holding or something around them. And now just create some variance. And speaking of zooming in, there are also close-up shots, which usually focus on an important object. So using a mix of like establishing shots, mid shots, talking head shots, close-up shots, and other shots I didn't mention, just think everything in between those, with different angles too, it allows you to really convey your story in a way that's interesting and engaging for the readers, and will keep them hooked and not getting bored. And also, don't forget that webtoons are vertical scrolling comics. And so there are some unique things you can do to take advantage of that. For example, you can use the vertical scroll to show characters falling, for instance. That's a really popular one. Or show just kind of some downward action, that the readers can like follow along and read with, and it's cool, and it really utilizes that webtoon format in a fun and unique kind of way that you can't do with traditional comics. And if you were like me some time ago and all that talk I just mentioned about shots and angles was overwhelming, don't fret. Just like with everything else in art, you can use references. For shots and panel layouts, I recommend referencing other webtoons for inspiration on how to lay out your episodes. There are a lot of amazing webtoons out there, of course, but some that really stand out to me in terms of their great paneling and overall just great story, art, everything, are Nevermore and Marionetta. And of course, don't just stop at webtoons. Inspiration can come from anywhere. You can look at other traditional comics, shots from movies and shows you like, basically any kind of visual media. And any kind of visual media would be helpful for your study. And when I say study, I mean trying to recreate these shots in a storyboard or a thumbnail format and understand why did the creator actually use this shot. Were they trying to showcase the character's emotions, show off the background, set up a kind of mood, show a fight scene. Like, it's not just about seeing the shot, you have to understand why they're using it, how they're using it, and how you can use it in your story. Because that's the most important part of the studying, right? If you don't understand why they're using it, then it's not really going to help. But yeah, don't be intimidated by all these different kinds of shots and names for shots. I don't even know the actual names for it, so don't worry about it. But when you study other forms of media, you'll develop this kind of intuitive sense for which shot would showcase action clearly, However, at least in my opinion, mastering this area involves not just being clear with what's going on in each panel, have that clarity component, but if you're able to create a certain mood with different angles and shots and colors, that's like next level, right? So I would say if you're just starting out, focus on just making sure everything's clear, the reader knows what's going on, and then as you get more, more skilled, as you develop more mastery in the area, you can then kind of focus on those more artistic things, setting up a mood, emotion, doing that through angles, do something interesting, Dutch angles, all this really cool stuff. Those stuff, of course, are all cool, but you have to know it's like that thing where you have to walk before you can run. Once you understand the fundamentals and the basics, then you can move on to the more advanced techniques and advanced ways of storytelling. But yeah, as you work on and practice, you develop these skills without even realizing it. So I would just say keep going and do your best. Thanks so much for watching until the end, and please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content. Let me know if there's any other topics about comics or art you want me to talk about, and I hope you have an amazing rest of the day.